The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to now hand over to counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea to continue putting questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honours. Good afternoon, counsel. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I have some questions for you on behalf of Mr. Nuon Chea. Earlier this morning, you spoke about the structure of the CPK Army. And if I understood it correctly, you were indicating 4 levels. You spoke about the level of divisions, the level of brigades, the level of battalion, and the level of company. Did I understand that correctly?
Response. The structure of the CPK Army started from division and brigade. Yes, from that hierarchy. And in that, there were brigades from the zones, and I believe I have answered your question.
You have also testified earlier that you were a commander of a battalion. Is it fair to say that you were a commander on the 3rd level of the hierarchy of the CPK Army?
Response. The soldiers were the Khmer Rouge soldiers.
Would you like to add anything, or was that your answer?
Response. I do not have anything else to add.
I'm asking you this question because yesterday, and also in your statements to the OCIJ, you called yourself a low-ranking soldier or a low-level officer. Could you explain to the chamber why you use this terminology to describe your position within the hierarchy as a low-level officer?
Response. As I already mentioned, we have our commanders for the divisions, brigades, regiments, battalions, and companies, and I think I have made it clear, and I already told the court in detail my roles in this army since this morning.
Mr. Chukrin, I know you did. I appreciate your answers, but I'm just trying to get clarification on why you call yourself a low-level officer rather than maybe a mid-ranking officer.
Response. I said I was at a low-ranking position because a battalion was ranking 3 or 4 levels below the division, and my rank was somehow the lowest in that military section.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Now, you've also answered earlier this morning that you did not dare to communicate with the top level of the military. Was that a rule which always applied, or were there sometimes exceptions to that rule?
Response. Concerning our work communication, I personally had to establish this communication with my commanders, but on some occasions, according to these circumstances, and as I was afraid of having committed some wrongdoings, I had to be very careful with communication with others, and I already made it very clear that the fearful atmosphere made our communication very limited.
My question to you was, maybe I rephrase, was there ever a moment that you communicated not with your direct commander, but one level higher to his commander?
Response. I'm afraid I don't quite understand your question. Could you please repeat it?
Of course, no problem. You reported to your commander, your direct commander. Did you ever report to his commander? In other words, did you ever skip one level in reporting?
Response. It was impossible. We couldn't do that because we had to follow the orders of our commands. But in some cases, for example, when we attended study sessions, we had to report to the participants in the meeting, including the senior leaders, about what happened from within our unit. So only on those occasions that we could report directly to everyone concerned in the meeting. But practically, in reality, in the way we communicated with our immediate lead, supervisor or commanders, we would never overstep this boundary.
Would it ever happen the other way around, that you would get instructions not from your direct commander, but the person above him? So I'm talking now about the situation that you're not reporting, but you're getting instructions.
Response. I understand your question now. For example, in a case when I had to send my troops to the east, My commander met us directly, and he also gave us instructions to everyone on how to proceed. And that was not part of the reporting scheme. It was part of the moment when the superior had to stop by and instruct the troops on how to deal with the enemies. That's all.
Would it be fair to say that between 75 and 79, the hierarchy in the military structure within the army of the CPK was strictly adhered to, both upwards and downwards?
Response: Yes, it is. It is an absolute. It was imperative.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Now I would like to speak a little bit with you about the contents of the things you were instructed, or the contents of the things you were supposed to know in that period. Yesterday, on various occasions, you have testified that certain knowledge was beyond your ability to know. It was beyond your knowledge, beyond your capacity. I will specify the times that you said that. For instance, in response to the question whether you would know what happened to Chu Chet, who was arrested, you said, it's beyond my ability to know. In response to a question about why the Khmer Vietnamese from Hanoi were arrested by the CPK, you've testified, I'm afraid I don't know the reason behind this. It's beyond my knowledge. Question about how many people were fleeing Kampot as refugees, you said, I don't know, this is beyond my capacity. You also testified yesterday, I do not know about their flight or about the number of people fleeing. This is beyond my ability because I was only a low-ranking soldier. Could you explain to us in general terms why certain knowledge or why certain things or certain policies were beyond your ability or capacity to know?
Response: I thank you very much for the question. As I already mentioned, yesterday co-prosecutor asked me a few questions concerning this. I am here as a witness to testify to the chamber regarding accounts of what that had happened back then. Nonetheless, it is nonetheless, I don't know why I am asked to tell the chamber the reason behind the evacuation of the population from the cities, the decision that was made or rendered by the senior leaders. And as a soldier, I find it difficult to say, to tell you about this, because several thousands of people had been evacuated from the cities. I knew that happened, but I have problem telling you what could have been the reason behind all this, and it's beyond my knowledge. And that's what I really stated clearly in my statement.
Are you nevertheless able to tell the chamber what was within the realm of your knowledge in that particular period? What were you supposed to know? What did you know as a artillery soldier or commander?
Response. The realm of my knowledge was confined to what had happened in the vicinity where I could bear witness to. And that's very limited, and that I can tell. But things that happened outside this would be difficult for me to say I know. And when it comes to evacuation, I can say that evacuation took place because it was known in Kampot province, and the evacuation also took place in other parts of the country. And again, I can testify to the events that actually had happened in the presence of me.
Now I will come back to that in more detail later, Mr. Chukrin, but yesterday and also this morning you have been confronted with things that you have said earlier to the OCIJ, things about CPK policies, things about the Standing Committee versus the Central Committee. If I understand you correctly now, these were things that were beyond the realm of your knowledge. So why have you actually said these things to the OCIJ? For instance, things about policies or the difference between the Central Committee and the Standing Committee, etc.
Response. As I said, I do not understand the detail of how the central and standing committees could have been operating. Nonetheless, I described in my statement to the investigators about the documents I have consulted during the study sessions I attended. So through study sessions, I could reflect about what I knew back then. And the reason that I could say so, because I did study the materials, and I still recollect what happened or what I learned during the study sessions. I hope I have made it clear already. Thank you.
So to summarize, your knowledge about policies, things that happened because of instructions or orders from the CPK, top leadership, you have acquired on the basis of the political study sessions. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is. I learned through these political study sessions.
And these were the sessions that you have been speaking about earlier, where there were 500 or 600 soldiers or officers or cadres being all together and listening to speeches, correct?
Response. during such sessions, not necessarily only the soldiers attended the sessions, civilians were also invited to attend the sessions. The only thing is that during such sessions we were not able to communicate with other participants other than our small group, and I can say that communication with others was very difficult and limited during that period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Let me get back. I will be speaking about the study sessions later, but let me get back to your role as a soldier. In an answer to a question, you have described your role as a soldier to, and I quote literally, to defend the country. That you were fighting at the border. Could you expand a little bit on that? What did you mean with defending the country and fighting at the border? What happened?
Response. Between 1975 and 1979, peace was very limited at that time. War was dominating the atmosphere, and national defense was part of our primary task, and we had to be deployed to the border frontier on several occasions, and we spent so much time there. And I had to be there at the border when we fought the Lone soldiers for over a year. And then during this period of time, I had to be stationed there all along.
But who were you fighting at the border, defending the country between 75 and 79?
Response. I think you know the answer. There was a war between Cambodia and Vietnam, and fightings took place along the border between these two countries, and we were fighting the Vietnamese.
Have you yourself actually been engaged in combat, in battles with the Vietnamese troops?
Response. I can't deny this. You see, I got injured and wounded, and this has been the result of engaging in such combat. So I said, yes, I engaged in the battlefields fighting the Vietnamese. And now I am physically not capable because I lost a leg during the fighting. You would not notice that I was handicapped, but indeed I lost the leg to that fight.
Mr. Witness, I cannot go into much detail in the fighting with the Vietnamese troop because it's outside of the scope of this trial. But only one quick question: do you remember when and where you got wounded?
Response. I got wounded on several occasions. I don't remember where I got injured because at least on roughly 20 occasions when I got injured. So my whole body has the scars of these wounds sustained during these fighting.
Mr. Peters, earlier you have testified that your task was helping to defend the country and that you yourself were not responsible for internal security. That is correct, right?
Response. I believe that I already answered this before. The soldiers were fully in charge of defending the country at the border. When it comes to security, it was the responsibility of the local authority.
Do you know who was responsible for the internal security in the region that you were stationed?
Response. I'm afraid I don't understand the question. And when it comes to internal security, how the civilians were managed, it was not the sole responsibility or responsibility of the soldiers, and soldiers had nothing to do with this internal security. That's all I can tell.
My question was whether you knew or know who was responsible in your region for the internal security. Do you know names?
Regarding the names, in Cambodia province, I have described those names already. I have told the names of the leaders. For example, Kong Chap, who was transferred out of Cambodia, and then somebody replaced him. So this is what I told to the chamber already. These leaders were responsible for the security of the civilians throughout Cambodia province. So I have told that to the chamber already.
Did you know of the existence of security centers in the region that you were stationed?
Regarding the security centers, I knew nothing about that. I did not know where it was located. I knew nothing about that. And I have mentioned that earlier already. I did not know whether such center existed or not. That was not the responsibility of me as a soldier.
And it is correct that you also did not know about the existence of a security center called S21?
Regarding S21, as I have said, I knew about that only when Doj was brought on trial. Before that, I knew nothing about S21. Even now, I do not know where it is located because I do not know Phnom Penh clearly. I have never had a chance to visit that place. I do not know Phnom Penh clearly, even now.
Is it fair to say that the existence of S21 or the existence of other security centers are things which were beyond your capacity to know?
That is correct. If I know, I will tell you. I do not hide any information, but if I do not know, I cannot tell you about that. So when you ask me whether it is fair, of course it is fair, it is correct. I know nothing about that.
Now, Mr. Chukrin, you've just testified that you do not know Phnom Penh well. You, as of today, still do not know where S21 is situated, for instance. But you have testified that you have been to Phnom Penh in the period between 75 and 79. Could you tell the Chamber how many times exactly you have been in Phnom Penh between 1975, let's say 17 April 1975 and 7 January 1979?
I went to Phnom Penh in 1996 once. At that time, I attended the study session, and after the session, we had a discussion in the group, and we could not communicate with the members of the other group. We could not walk around. So I did not know different places in Phnom Penh. And I talked about this yesterday and this morning when I responded to the question put by the co-prosecutors. And I hope that you also understand that. So this is the reason why I do not know the place well. These are the reasons.
Mr. Withers, maybe I didn't hear it well in my ear. I heard you say 96, or the interpreter say 96. Of course, you meant 1976. So do I get it well if I say that this period, this time in 1976 was the only time between 17 April 1975 and 7 January 1979 that you have been in Phnom Penh?
Yes, sorry. It was not 1996, it was 1976.
Thank you. And that particular time, the study session, that was the only time that you have been in Phnom Penh in that period?
Yes, it was only that one. And later on, I just passed Phnom Penh. I just took a rest in Phnom Penh for 1 or 2 hours. At that time, I was transferred from Cambodia province.
It might have been asked already, and if it has been, forgive me, Mr. Chukrin, but do you remember how many days in 76 you were in Phnom Penh? How many nights did you sleep that particular time in 76 in Phnom Penh?
I did not remember clearly because it happened long time ago. It may be over 20 days. I cannot remember the exact number. It perhaps was over 20 days. I have forgotten because I do not pay attention to that thing.
Do you remember where you were sleeping in those 3 weeks, 20 days? Was that in barracks? Was that somewhere else in Phnom Penh?
There was no barrack. There was a house near the school. Because this is not a military unit, because we came to attend study session, so there was a mixture of military officer and civil official as well. So there were houses, there were shelter located near the school building.
Now, you've testified earlier that during those study sessions there were around 500 to 600 people attending. Do you remember with how many soldiers or civilians or cadre you were staying or sleeping in that house?
I do not remember about that. I do not remember the number. Because I do not pay attention to that. But of course, that event happened at that time. But when you ask me about the number, I cannot recall the number.
You have said something about which dates these sessions took place. I'm trying to see if you could be more specific. Do you remember exact dates? Do you remember what it was, for instance, at the beginning of the rainy season? Do you remember anything about particular times?
When I came to Phnom Penh, as far as I can remember, it might be in April or May because the rain started. The farming, we also started doing farming as well at the time, but of course I cannot remember clearly. I cannot remember the exact time, but I just remember that I used to come to Phnom Penh, but of course it might be at this period, in this month. But of course I'm not so certain about the exact time.
And when you left Phnom Penh after 20 days, 3 weeks, do you remember with whom you left? Was it with your men who you were commanding, or with others? And where did you go?
Those who came to study with me, so all those who came with me, we came on a truck. Some were civil officials, some were soldiers, and there were many people at the time, but I didn't know where they went. Some of them may be alive, but right now, even I meet them, I may not know them at all, because that happened over 30 years ago. Some who came to attend that session with me have died because of the war. Some who came back, who returned with me, were civil officials who were in charge of the commune or district, but of course I did not know them. Most of them have died. Maybe only a few of them are still alive right now. And I do not know where they are living. So when you ask me about those people, of course I do not know where they are, because that happened for over 30 years ago. And you may know about the situation in 1979, when I was transferred from Cambodia to Svay Rieng. 200 or 300 soldiers stay with me, but of course I do not know where they went. We were separated. Some went to the Thai border area, some went to other provinces. So I can give brief answer only when you ask me question. But when you ask me about the exact number and the people who attended the session with me, I know nothing about them. I do not know where they are right now. So this is what I can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. And when you left Phnom Penh after those 3 weeks of study sessions, you went to Cambodia, correct?
Yes, it is. We went back to our respective units.
And have I understood correctly that since then you have not returned to Phnom Penh before 1979?
Of course not. I did not return to Phnom Penh.
During those 3 weeks of study sessions, was that the first time that you saw Nuon Chia?
Yes, it was the first time to see Mr. Nuon Chia. That was my first time.
How did you know then, at that particular time, it was Nuon Chia?
He was in front of me, he was in front of us, and then others introduced him to us. They said, this person was Mr. Pol Pot, that person was Mr. Nuon Chia. So we saw him, and of course, I knew him. I saw where he was sitting. I saw who did the presentation. So I knew he was. And that was the only chance we had to see him. And beside that, we cannot see him at all.
How many times in those 3 weeks have you seen Nuon Chia speak to the 500 or 600 soldiers or cadres?
If you ask me about that, I cannot remember. But of course, he spoke at the time, but he did not speak much. He did not speak much.
Have you ever, in those 3 weeks in Phnom Penh, spoken to Nuon Chia, what we would call face-to-face? or maybe with some other people in a room, for instance?
I noticed that the leaders of the Khmer Rouge, when they attended the study session, left that study session immediately. They did not talk to the subordinates or to the participant. They rushed to go back. They left immediately. They did not like talking to the participants. This is from my observation. Pol Pot, Nuon Chea just did like that. He did not talk to the participant. I did not know whether he talked to the high-ranking official, but of course, after he finished his presentation, he just left. He did not talk to the subordinate, to the participant. I did not see that. I did not see him talking to the participant.
So to be absolutely sure, he never gave you a hand, you never had a personal conversation, and you never saw him speaking to comrades in front of you, only addressing the crowd of 500, 600 people, correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Have you ever seen Nuon Chea since then? Have you ever seen him? No, let me rephrase. Have you ever spoken to him or seen him in a small group after those 3 weeks in Phnom Penh? Or somewhere else, not in Phnom Penh, somewhere else?
No, never. I never met him in a group. I could see him clearly only in that occasion. Later on, I never saw him, I never met him.
Now, Mr. Witness, I am puzzled. Maybe I don't understand you correctly, but you have just testified that the only time that you saw Nuon Chea was him addressing a crowd. You never spoke to him personally, face to face, or within a group. Yet you have also testified that Nuon Chea, together with Pol Pot, gave orders to purge cadres in the east. To me, that doesn't correspond at all. Would you be able to clarify your earlier testimony?
Regarding his speech, regarding the purge of the enemy, at the time he lectured about that document. That is why I refer to that document. That document was used for his lecture. And I can conclude that the presentation of that document led to the chaos in Cambodia. This is what I want to tell you. But
Mr. Witness, you've testified earlier also that communication within the CPK between cadre was I quote you literally, secret, strictly confidential. Would you be able to explain why Nguyen Chia, in front of a crowd of 500 to 600 people, would order the killing of fellow cadre?
Regarding this point, as I have explained, he highlighted the content of the document, the mistake, for example. And when we return to our unit, in other words, those who had attended the session, and I did not know whether they had done something wrong. Some of them, some of the leaders in Cambodia were arrested, were in danger. That is why I conclude that the direction from the leader of the CPK here led to that kind of problem.
Mr. Chukrin, I put it to you that you have never actually heard Nguyen Chia say anything about purges of East Zone cadres. Is that correct?
I never heard of Nguyen Chia's words, but at that time he may heard the presentation by Pol Pot about the people in the East. And I have told that to the chamber already. He was over there and he understood the situation. And the troops all over the country, and especially the troops from the southwest, were sent to the east. So that means Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia were over there when the plan was made. And I believe that they understood that. They knew about that. That is all.
Mr. Witness, you are under the obligation to tell the court what you have seen with your own eyes, what you have heard with your own ears. My question to you is, and you have testified or you have given a statement to the OCIJ that there was a special meeting. I'm referring to E3361 English Khmer 0076453. There was a special meeting. The decision to purge the East Zone was made jointly by the Standing Committee with Son San acting on the orders of Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia and Tamok, who were all present during the meeting. Among the military commanders were Mayors Moot, Yang Pan, Sok Chan, Tiao, and Tipus. The meeting to provide instructions on the purge was held at a different site from that of the Party General Assembly, which was held at the Olympic Stadium. This meeting to provide instructions was held at the military headquarters near Beng Trabek. Isn't it true, Mr. Witness, that you were never there and that you cannot testify from your own knowledge about this event?
That answer was explained this morning when I responded to the question put by counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia. I clarified this morning already that was not a special meeting. So when I talk about the study session here, there was a plan. So when I came to Phnom Penh, my troops passed Ta Khmau and Chba Ampo, and we took a rest in Phnom Penh, and the leader, Son Sen, gave us some advice. And of course, that account was correct. That was not a special meeting. It was a special case, circumstance. At that time, the troops were prepared to travel on their mission. So I clarified that this morning already. I talked about that in detail already. There was a plan from the time when I attended the session, and later on, when my troops were sent to the east, there was a special circumstance in which the leader came to meet us, and it was rare for him to meet us, and he gave us some guidance, some direction on how to defend the country to fight with the enemy. And I described that to the co-prosecutor already, to the co-investigating judge. At that time, the troops in the E-zone were transferred out of the E-zone. So when the troops of the southwest were sent to the east, the forces in the east were transferred out of the E-zone. And I did not know where they went. They were taken. When I was in Svay Rieng, I heard Mr. Ryan say that the troops of the E-zone were transferred to Kampong Chnang. But of course, they came to Kampong Chnang without any weapons, without any arms. They were assigned to build the airfield over there. So this is a kind of a change of troops. So I would like to make the clarification regarding this point.
Thank you. I just want to have some clarifications in respect of things that you have stated to the...
The President, could you please hold on? We have some problem with French channel. I would like this to be checked first. The President, Judge Lavianya, you may now proceed.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
If there is no technical problem, I will proceed. But, Mr. President, can I give a piece of advice to you, Councillor Koppe? When you ask your questions and you refer to documents, please give the ERN codes. In your previous question, I believe you were referring to a document, but the interpreters didn't catch the ERN code, and the result is that your quote was not translated verbatim. So, when you do that, perhaps you could slow down a little bit, and that way we get the best interpretation. If you still have the precise references of the document you were quoting just now, you might like to give us them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Lavergne, for your advice. I did not say indeed the French code. That is correct. Mr. President, actually, I had anticipated not to quote from his earlier statements, but now I might have. And it could be a convenient moment to break so that I can get the French ER number of this specific quote, if that is all right with you. Otherwise, I'll move on.
The President, to facilitate the smooth examination, we may give you some time to settle this, and it is now appropriate moment already for the adjournment. The chamber will adjourn for 20 minutes. Security personnel are now instructed to bring the witness to the waiting room and have him return to the courtroom by 10 to 3.
សូមក្រោកឈរ